Yeah, just come out tonight and spend time with us because I know you have families and potentially other places to be, and that hormone and hormone imbalances are the number one reason why patients find us, male and female, sadly. And they're also I'm going to speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for Katie too, is one of our favorite topics. I mean, the coolest thing about the endocrine system, the hormonal system, is that there's so many checks and balances, so many of, and we're going to talk about the key players. Everyone's talking to everybody, and the thyroid can tell the adrenals to shut up, the adrenals can tell the ovaries to be quiet. It's just a really cool dance. And when it's harmonious, it works and it's beautiful and you feel great in your body. And when something is out of whack or multiple players are out of whack, it becomes very challenging to feel good in your body. I mean, I just got off a call with a woman yesterday and I asked her what her favorite part about her body was, and she burst into tears. I mean, we are just so disconnected from the thing that's working really hard for us. So we hope tonight, the intention tonight is to, jam out about, who are the key players in the endocrine system? What is menopause? What is perimenopause? What gets in the way? Sort of chief complaints that we hear. We're going to share some labs with you that we have seen in some of our patients. You actually like physically see what we're testing for and why. And then, obviously some solutions and some lifestyle hacks that you guys can start implementing tonight, specifically around sleep. As you all know, I'm kind of a crazy person when it comes to sleep because it's like, it's free. You can do it for free. And it plays a huge impact on our hormonal health. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we will open it up to Q&A in the end. So we can't promise to get to everybody, but we will, definitely try and help out as much as we can. And then you guys know how to find us. Like, I am very vocal on Instagram. We'll leave our contact information, email and stuff like that in the chat in the end. So if you don't get your questions answered, please, you know, I, we're not doing this to hear ourselves talk. It really pains both of us that we had to spend several six figures to understand how it works. You all deserve that. You all deserve to feel good. And there are things that you can be doing, mostly free things that you can be doing on a daily basis that we just aren't doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this call. And we are here to hold the hand of you, to hear you, to give you tools, and to educate you. Because again, doctor means teacher. Both of us take that very seriously. I think it's wicked fun to teach patients how to feel good. And I'm staring at Deb. Deb Peters has been with me for a really long time. She's turned into a very dear friend of mine, but she found me because she didn't feel good in her body. And now it's like, when she has an issue, she doesn't actually call me. She just does it herself because she learned over all of those years of how to actually take care of the vessel that we were given. So, I would like you guys to, and you can put it in the chat or not, or just write it down. Like, what made you join tonight? What made you come on live specifically and not wait for the recording? Like, what are you dying to know? What are you dying to hear? What's the intention? How are you suffering? How are you struggling? What are you confused about? I know there's a lot of questions, but like any of those, like please put them in the chat if you feel like being a little bit vulnerable. Because it's also good for us to know what drove you here tonight. Because we listen to, I mean, gosh, between Katie and I and the team, a lot of people a week and what they're suffering with. And it's sadly getting younger and younger. We just had a kiddo diagnosed with hypothyroidism at 14 years old this week. And like this just, we don't have to be suffering. So yeah, put in the chat sort of your intention, what you hope to get out of this, why you're here. And then, again, like what you're confused about. And we will be taking some questions in the end. We will wrap up at 9 Eastern Standard Time so that everyone can go to sleep because that's very, very important. So just to kick off, what are the players that we're even talking about when we talk about the endocrine system? Katie's going to share screen here. And so and if you guys want to write these down, eventually we will write a book where there's these characters because I have all of these key players in the endocrine system as characters. Because they all have different personality, they all have different jobs, they all make you feel a certain way. And like I said earlier, they can all connect with each other and talk to each other. And I mean, I kind of feel like, the ovaries and the thyroid and the adrenals are all like siblings. And, like I said, the thyroid can tell the adrenals to shut up and the ovaries can tell, the thyroid to stop. And so let's start with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is in your brain. So is the pituitary. And they're the conductors. I picture them as running the orchestra. And the hypothalamus talks to the pituitary, and then the pituitary talks to the thyroid, adrenals, ovaries, the gut, insulin, cortisol. So the hypothalamus is kind of the main runner, and then talks to the pituitary to send messages down, specifically to the thyroid. Then if the way on the adrenals, but if there is a very acute situation, like you actually see a tiger, the hypothalamus can actually override the pituitary. So this isn't like really stressed out things happen. Your pituitary gets a punt to the back seat and the hypothalamus is like, I'm taking over. So really the hypothalamus is the quarterback. It's the main gig. Then you have the pituitary. Then you have the thyroid, which is the butterfly gland that sits in your neck. It is responsible for a lot of things. Metabolism, heart rate, and body temperature are just some of the big ones. The thyroid is also the sensitive kid in the family. It is very sensitive to heavy metals. It is very sensitive to toxicity. It is very sensitive to you not speaking your truth. That's not an accident that it sits right in the center of your throat and right next to your voice box. And that's like the whole, we should do a class on like the emotional pieces of these glands.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So that's the thyroid. Thyroid is the butterfly gland. Then we have the adrenals, which you guys have definitely heard me talk about. It's the two glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They are responsible for lots of things. Our sleep-wake cycle, our blood sugar handling, and our stress response. Okay. They can also make sex hormones. This is a key thing to understand tonight is that they also secrete cortisol, another player. So your adrenals are, if I was going to pick like the star of the show, it would be the adrenal glands. And we will talk about why that is and why we really need to be taking care of them, no matter what stage you're in. So the adrenals, so sleep-wake cycle, then stress management, stress response, blood sugar, and they can produce sex hormones and cortisol. So that's important to remember. Then we have the ovaries. And the ovaries, Katie's going to talk about in the next slide, but we all know that they hold the follicles, which are eggs, and they come in active around, between the ages of 9 and 15, and then they exit stage left anywhere between 40 and 65, depending on who you are. Then we have the gut. And the gut microbiome, again, all of you are very familiar with what the gut microbiome does and is, but just for a refresher, from our mouth to our anus is lined with trillions of bacteria called our microbiome. Those bacteria, there are more cells, there are more of them than are cells in our body. Dr. Mark Hyman says that we are 95% bacteria and 5% human. He is not wrong. The question is why? Because they are making neurotransmitters for us, they're making hormones for us, they make vitamins for us, they play a key role in our immune system. So you all have heard of Ozempic and tirzepatide, those weight loss diabetic drugs. That what those are is they're called GLP-1 agonists. That means they're pushing the GLP-1 hormone in the body. Well, our gut makes GLP-1. So basically what those drugs are doing, and I'm not going to launch down that road, but what those drugs are doing is telling on all of us that we have a metabolic issue. GLP-1 is involved with that. So the gut plays a key role in how we feel, our metabolism, our weight management, our brain health, and our hormone health. Then we have insulin. Insulin is secreted by the pancreas. I know this is like, I feel like it's like 8th grade biology, but we just have to get through this because there's a lot of play. I know. It's seriously. I'm trying to make it fun. We should. Okay, insulin should be like British. Okay, but insulin secreted by the pancreas in response to food. So when you eat and your blood sugar goes up, insulin gets, that glucose knocks on the pancreas's door and is like, yeah, can we have a shuttle to the muscle cells? That would be great. And so then insulin gets shot out by the pancreas, holds the hand of
just it keeps doing that thumbs up.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Sorry. Gets shot out by the pancreas, And then insulin holds the hand of glucose and opens the cell doors of the muscle cells and shoves it in and closes that door to bring your blood glucose back down to normal. It is important for tonight's conversation to understand that insulin is a storage hormone.
Mhm.
It stores things, specifically fat. Why? Because when we need fat is a really cool source of energy. And so when the body thinks that it needs to store energy for later, it has high levels of insulin as one of the reasons. Okay, so it stores fat and it shovels glucose into cells. Insulin also will prevent fat loss. So when we have high levels of insulin in the blood, you can't lose fat. Okay, and we will go into this more in detail. Then we have cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone that is secreted by the adrenal glands when when we're stressed out. It also is secreted by the adrenal glands in a circadian rhythm. If you guys want to geek out on, fun pictures, if you Google image cortisol circadian rhythm and then Google image that, you'll see it has this really nice curve where it spikes in the morning and then slowly decreases through the day. Spikes in the morning and slowly decreases through the day. When it spikes in the morning, that's what wakes you up. That's what makes you feel alert. That's why a lot of people feel their best in the morning. They're really productive. And as the day goes on, their cortisol starts to lower. And so in the reverse curve to that is melatonin. Melatonin, remember, is that's our sleep hormone. So when cortisol is high around 7 a.m. and wakes you up, melatonin is low. This is where you've seen all of those Instagram reels and posts and studies saying get outside and get sunlight on your face in the morning and your eyes, whether it's out physically outside or by a window. It's very important to get sunlight on your eyes in the morning because it burns off that excess melatonin so that cortisol can shine. We want cortisol to be high in the morning. So having high cortisol, quote unquote, is not bad if it's in the morning. We want it then to keep lowering throughout the day. And then slowly throughout the day, melatonin is increasing and puts us to sleep. That's in a perfect world. Now we're going to show you a lot of examples of how that gets messed up and why. So those are the players. Again, we will eventually make a children's book about this and make it less want, but it's just really important because I know that a lot of times when people talk about menopause, they think it's just estrogen and progesterone, and maybe testosterone plays a role. That's just not the case. And we're going to go over why.
Yes. Will you just keep an eye on admitting people as they come in? Okay. Okay. So then it's kind of talking about what is actually happening in menopause and perimenopause. Like Tanda said, there's a lot of key players that are happening. Kind of focusing on, so essentially we have a 28-day cycle, right? Our ovaries come online when we go through puberty, and our ovaries are the primary producers of estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone through our reproductive years. Okay. Then what happens is we hit a stage called perimenopause. And perimenopause can last about 10 years. And it varies kind of when people enter into perimenopause. It can be late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s. But, typically by 45, you can have a pretty good sense that you're in perimenopause, or at least in the perimenopause. So what happens in perimenopause and why there can be a level of normalcy that we feel different from month to month. We may notice some changes in our symptoms. We may notice some changes in our cycles. Maybe our cycles are getting a little bit longer. Maybe they're getting heavier. Maybe we're having more symptoms around, like more PMS symptoms around our period. But what happens is the ovaries basically are gearing up for retirement. Okay. And sometimes they're going to do their job really well. Like some months they're going to do their job really well. And some months they barely show up in the office. Okay. So what happens is you go into perimenopause and you're like, the things that were working for me in my 20s and 30s and early 40s just aren't. I haven't necessarily changed the way that I eat. I haven't necessarily changed the way that I'm moving my body. I haven't necessarily changed anything. And yet my body is changing. And I'm maybe slowly creeping up in weight, or the things that I used to do to lose that weight. That's, kind of I think a key driver for a lot of women is just like, I don't understand what's going on with my body. And so what's happening is that your ovaries are some months, again, they're doing a really good job. Okay. So some months you're ovulating. Some months that egg is going to be really healthy and is going to be able to produce enough progesterone. Some months you might not ovulate. Some months that's going to be an unhealthy follicle. It's not going to be able to do the heavy lifting. And so you feel wonky month to month. Now, there is some level of normalcy around that. That just is unfortunately the way the cookie crumbles. That's the natural progression through perimenopause. What shouldn't be happening though is that you feel unrecognizable in your body, that you feel it's devastating to your life, it's interrupting your quality of life. You all of a sudden have insomnia, you can't sleep anymore, you're feeling just not good in your body and you don't know why. But there is some level of like, this is what's actually happening in your ovaries. And I like to educate people around that because it's like you feel like it's something maybe you're doing wrong. There is just a natural progression through this. So what happens is you go through perimenopause for about 10 years. And the brain is constantly communicating to the ovary. So, like Tanda said, we have the hypothalamus and the pituitary. They're what we call upstream hormones. Okay. So, that's a signal from the brain being sent to the target organ. So, we can send signals to the thyroid, we can send signals to the adrenal glands, we can send signals to the ovaries to do their job. Okay. The brain is like, ovaries, we're going to just do this the same as usual. I'm going to send the signal and then you do the thing. And you're going to create estrogen in the first half of your cycle and you're going to create progesterone in the second half. That's just what we're going to do. So the brain is just continually sending that message. The ovaries just sometimes respond and sometimes they don't. Again, it's just they're gearing up for retirement. They're taking all the vacation days that they have left and they're not really telling the rest of the body. So then the rest of the body, you go through menopause, right? And menopause is 12 consecutive months without a period. Okay. So if you have 6 months without a period, then you get a period, the clock starts over. It's 12 consecutive months. So on that 13th month, you would say that you're officially menopausal. And so what happens is that the ovaries just exit stage left, they retire, and they don't necessarily tell anybody. And the key player who then has to pick up the slack. So now you've got the ovaries have retired. Who's now going to do that job, right? Because we think about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone in the form of our reproductive cycle. They're doing far more for us than just, kind of the ability to have a baby or not. Estrogen is very cardioprotective. It is, it protects our brain, it protects our bones, it protects our skin, our collagen, the elasticity of our skin. I mean, it plays a huge role in so many other areas of our body. And what happens is the adrenal, so we have to have some way to make some amount of estrogen, some amount of progesterone, and some amount of testosterone because we need them to be a healthy human being. We don't need them in the quantities that we do, in our reproductive years. We don't need the amount that the ovaries make, but we still need some. And so the key player who's making up the difference is the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands can actually make estrogen, they can make testosterone, and they can make progesterone. So that's really who is taking over the role. And we're going to talk about how this, like particularly blood sugar and our stress response really interrupt that because they should be able to do that. But here you have your two little adrenal glands. And just to kind of paint the picture, it's like, potentially you get your period when you're 15, you're a 15-year-old kid, potentially you go on hormonal birth control in your 20s. Then, it's like you're pulling all-nighters in college, you're binge drinking alcohol, you're running on caffeine, you are trying to find yourself, you're building a career, you're dating, you're finding a partner, you're potentially maybe having kids or not having kids, you're building a career, you're worried about money, you're buying a house, you're exposed to environmental toxins, you're eating ultra-processed foods, you're running through the drive-through, you are exposed to pesticides in the air, and then all of a sudden you hit 45 and you're like, hey, adrenal glands, do you mind taking over also doing the sex hormone stuff? And the adrenal glands are like, oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll get right on that after I go through this mountain of stress that I've been dealing with for decades. Right. And so then we say, adrenal glands, why are you not being able to do this? And they're saying, I literally do not have the capacity to do this. And so that's just kind of laying the land of what does it actually mean to be in perimenopause? What does it actually mean to be in menopause? And then who takes over, right? When the ovaries retire, who's doing the heavy lifting? The other thing is what happens is we have in perimenopause, what happens is our progesterone, which is kind of our calming, more relaxing hormone. That's kind of the key player in that second half of our cycle. But progesterone makes us feel kind of calm, cool, collected. You know, it's kind of that like relaxation hormone that starts to drop. And during perimenopause, estrogen can swing very wildly. So you can have months where it's really high and months where it's really low, which is why you start to, get some of those like vasomotor hot flashes, night sweats, that kind of stuff can start to come up. But there are also over 300 different symptoms that can be attributed to estrogen. So also, that pesky joint pain, that ringing in the ears, that itchy ears, the dry mucous membranes, thinning of the hair, vaginal dryness, uh, mood changes is also very significant. So people, we do see that the highest rates of depression and suicide are in women between the ages of 40 and 50 in their fourth and fifth decade. And this is largely attributable to the drop in estrogen because it plays such a key role in how we actually feel. So, kind of to that end, I think a lot of people are barking up multiple different trees. They're like, okay, maybe I need to see a chiropractor for this joint pain. An ENT doc for the ringing in my ears. And yet a lot of these symptoms really could be attributed to the fluctuation in hormones.
Good luck. Okay, so menopause and blood sugar. Oh gosh. So blood sugar is 97. Again, many of you have heard me say this, 97% of us are metabolically unwell. What does that mean? It means that when we eat food, our typically because of chronic stress and the standard American diet or the standard like Western diet, which is full of ultra processed food. And I personally know a lot of you on this call, and I know a lot of you on this call have cleaned up your food very dramatically. So I really want you to take your right hand and put it on your left shoulder and pat yourself in the back. And yet I'm going to throw myself under the bus. Like I spent most of my kid, teenage, and 20 somethings eating Snackwell fat-free cookies, fat-free yogurt, fat-free frozen yogurt, cereal, kudos bars. I mean, that's what I lived on. And so my metabolism going into my 20s was already not doing well. And I also throw myself under the bus. I'm 44, just to give you guys a sense of like, I was a teenager when we were going through that fat-free craze. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of studies showing now that insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction and dysregulation is starting in our teenage years. And I'm going to even say it's starting before the age of 10. We're starting to do liver transplants on children because of fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease is insulin resistance. What does that actually mean? It means that because of the diet that we are eating, soda that we were drinking, energy drinks, Starbucks, drive-through, cereal, Subway, all of those foods that we were eating keeps our blood sugar really high. We're also very sedentary. And again, I'm going to pick on Deb because she's moves a lot. But we're typically much more sedentary than we used to be. So our muscle cells don't need as much glucose as we're eating. So muscle cells are the number one eater. The brain and muscle cells eat a ton of glucose, sugar. So when you eat food, like I said earlier, blood sugar, the glucose in your blood goes up, and then insulin will get secreted. It will take that hand of the glucose. It will open the door of the brain cell or the muscle cell, shove it in, close it. Your blood sugar comes back down and everything goes back to homeostasis. That's 3% of the population. What the rest of us are doing is you eat food and glucose is high and insulin gets secreted and holds the hand of the glucose, knocks on the cell of the brain or the muscle and says, yeah, so I've got some glucose here. Do you want to, open the door? And the muscle cell's like, I'm sorry, I'm completely saturated because you're not moving your body, you're not lifting weights, you're not walking. So we don't need any more energy. And so then insulin's like, well, I have to get glucose out of the blood. Like it will literally kill us. So, because high glucose levels are very toxic to the body. And so then glucose and insulin are running around the body, knocking on everyone's door saying, I have to put this somewhere. And finally, insulin gets down to the liver and says, yeah, about the muscle cells, they're full. And the liver's like, I mean, sure, you can store it here, but it doesn't feel great, but you can store it here. And so then over years of doing that, your muscle cells, you live a sedentary life, you're eating processed foods, your glucose is high, your insulin is high, and it's constantly shoving glucose into the liver. And that's called fatty liver. 90 million Americans are going to be diagnosed in like per year. I can't remember the statistic. It was an exorbitant amount of us are walking around with fatty liver. And I have actually heard patients of mine say to me that Western medical doctors told them that's not a problem. Go home. It's a problem. So then after the liver's saturated, then insulin's like, well, now I can't park glucose in the liver. Where else do I go? And that's when insulin starts shoving it into fat cells. Because remember when I said in the beginning, insulin is a storage hormone. It will store glucose as fat in places that we want. Well, it'll store glucose as energy in places that we want, like the muscle cells in the brain. And if it can't do that, it stores it in places that we don't want, like our liver and our abdomen. I hope this is resonating, you guys. I know it's a lot. So when we go through perimenopause, we're walking into perimenopause at whatever, so let's just say 44 years, 45 years old, you start walking into the decade of perimenopause. And you came into that decade already metabolically unwell. What happens in perimenopause and menopause is we go into an insulin resistant state. And I can't remember, it was a podcast that I listened to, or Katie talks about this all the time, about how it makes so much sense for the body to go into the reverse puberty with some extra fuel, you guys. Like adding extra fat is like, it's energy, it's immediate energy. So the body's being really smart. It's like, oh man, like ovaries are piecing out. We need to take care of our bones. We need a little bit of extra padding. We need to take care of, like, what if Susie Q doesn't have food for a week? Mm-hmm. We need to have extra energy. So it starts going into a then like an insulin resistant, like pre-diabetic state.
And the body is perceiving that it's ill, right? It's like if we have metabolic dysfunction for decades, the body's like, yeah, things are definitely not happening optimally, right? I don't necessarily have a place to put this glucose. Now I'm packing it around the liver. Now my liver is burdened. Like the body goes into these next kind of section of aging, these next decades, saying, okay, and also I'm a little bit more vulnerable. I don't have the muscle mass that I did. It's harder to maintain. I may want a little of extra padding around my
vital
organs and my joints, right? Mm-hmm. It's like falling is a possibility when we start to become weak. The body senses that. And so what happens, the other thing that we'll do is we actually, and this is, we can kind of go, I think it's on the next slide too. Yeah. But what also happens, I was going to roll into that labs. But what happens too is that the body says, I'm not making enough estrogen. You know what also makes estrogen? Fat. So if the ovaries have exited stage left, the adrenals can't take over because of chronic stress, because the adrenals also, so the main jobs of the adrenals are to produce cortisol, which is our stress hormone, to help regulate this blood sugar balancing, to help with our electrolyte balancing. And then if they have enough time, and if they have enough resources, and if they have enough energy, they can make sex hormones. So they'll make DHEA, and then that can be turned into progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. Now, cortisol, our stress response, and our sleep-wake cycle, blood sugar, and electrolyte balance, far more important for our survival than sex hormones, right? We feel better. We're generally healthier. We can live a bit longer if we've got estrogen and progesterone going on, but it's not acute survival. Blood sugar can kill you. Electrolyte imbalance can kill you. Dying from a tiger and not having enough cortisol can kill you, right? So it's like not having sex hormones, not exactly top priority. And so the body will prioritize making sure that we have these other functions and we have enough energy to do that job. And if we have enough time, then we can go in and make the sex hormones. But again, it's just not going to be top priority. This also goes for women in their reproductive years. Stress is a huge issue, and we are going to talk about that, but I do want to kind of roll into a little bit more about how this can be sneaky, you guys. It's like insulin resistance, again, is starting in our teenage years. And I think when we hear maybe insulin resistance or we hear diabetes, that we associate a kind of particular body type with that. That is just patently false. Okay. So we can have a variety of different bodies. We can have bigger bodies who are not insulin resistant. We can have smaller bodies who are very insulin resistant. So it's not necessarily about what you look like, and you don't necessarily feel it, right? So you may, kind of eventually in your 40s and 50s start to see the results of this insidious process that has been going on for decades, but it's not something like I eat a donut and my blood sugar raises and my insulin raises and I feel that, potentially I may feel the crash of that afterward, but chances are probably not. It's not something that it's like knocking on your door. And so this is happening insidiously. The other thing that is happening is that we are not running the labs that will tell you if this is happening. And I cannot tell you how many women come into our practice and they're like, oh no, I just had labs done by my PCP. You're talking about insulin resistance and blood glucose, but my A1C was fine and my fasting glucose was fine. Like, that's not my problem. What else could it be? Right. Cause you go in, you're like, doc, I don't know. My weight keeps creeping up. My joints hurt. I don't feel good. And now, it's like, what's going on? And so they look at the things and they say, everything's normal. Go back and, keep doing what you're doing. Or maybe just like exercise more, eat less, exercise more. I love that one. That gives us no information. But then we run your labs and we actually look at your insulin. We actually look at the entire picture, and you have insulin resistance, right? And this next case, so
Guys, this next case is so awesome. So we're going to share some labs with you. So so after our last master class that we did last month, we had some people reach out and do labs with us. And so this is a 59-year-old female. And feels like absolute crap, has been gaining weight. Nothing's changed. Her diet hasn't changed. Her movement hasn't changed. She works as a librarian, so she's not incredibly active, but she has absolutely tanked energy. And she's literally was like, Tanda, I am eating, like, I get to the point now, it's like, I literally could be eating ice cubes and I'm still gaining weight. And I feel like crap. I can't even look in the mirror. I mean, she was so upset about how she was feeling in her body. And she's like, and I have been going to my my primary care for years. And she's like, everything's fine. And then so she jumped in, did labs with us, and I'm sitting on this call with her and I was asking her, hadn't seen her labs yet. And so I'm sitting on the call with her and I'm asking her the questions like, how's your energy? Horrible. Tell me about the weight gain. Yeah, I've gained like 25 pounds in a really short period of time. Doesn't matter what I do. Doesn't matter what I eat. And I've changed nothing. Then tell me about your sleep. Oh, it's absolutely horrific. I can't stay asleep. My mind's racing. How's stress level? Oh, most stressed out I've been in the past 2 years has like been horrible. So, but everything is fine from her PCP. Well, we ran her labs and just look at her fasting insulin, you guys. Just when it says insulin and it says 69.1, most Western medical doctors don't run that. I want to see that, Katie, and I want to see that number below 5. What did I say in the beginning that insulin does? It's a storage hormone, specifically fat. And here's this woman who has changed nothing, not eating differently, not moving differently, and her insulin over the years, because of chronic stress and being an American female, her insulin was slowly creeping up, creeping up, creeping up, creeping up to the point where it is at 70. But she's fine. Everything's fine. And then her triglycerides at 222. I want to see that number below 80. And triglycerides are also an insidious creeper. And that is more indicative of diet choices. And it is also more harmful to the cardiovascular system than LDL, which we blame. Now, why do we blame LDL? Well, we have a statin. Why don't we blame triglycerides? Well, because it's diet. There's no drug for that. And yes, I'm not anti-drug, but there are a time and place for all of that. But I want to look at triglycerides. I want to look at fasting insulin. And then that apolipoprotein B is at 92. That is kind of a collection of more of the harmful cholesterol than it's a way better marker for cardiac health than LDL and HDL. So this is just, when I saw this, first of all, I was like, thank gosh that she found us, because, and it's not just about us. This is like, thank God she did these labs, because that insulin had been creeping up since she was probably 12 years old. And at having that at 70, again, I want that at below 5. And so anyway, we've got her on a protocol, and it's not just about diet. This is about stress management. This is about movement. This is about sleep. This is about, what do you actually love? Where is your creative streak? What actually lowers stress for you? What are you doing about prioritizing protein? All of you on this call, please prioritize protein, 25 to 30 grams per meal. And so it's so much goes into this. And like, can we turn this around in 90 days? I don't know. We're going to put her on a plan and then redo labs. But I guarantee you that her insulin will come drastically down, and nobody saw it.
Yeah. And these are just the things that you guys, it's like, it's just so important to get these run, because when estrogen drops, we become more susceptible to the diseases of this, right? It's like we become more insulin resistant, which puts us at greater risk of cardiovascular disease. It puts us at greater risk of osteoporosis. It puts us at greater risk of dementia. It puts us greater risk of cancer. It puts us at, we increase our risk to develop these diseases. And what happens is you look at fasting glucose, or you look at LDL and HDL, but you're not looking at these labs. I mean, apolipoprotein B, that is a much better predictor of cardiovascular disease than LDL and HDL, or just total cholesterol combined. And so looking at this, because going into menopause puts you at increased risk for this. Period. Just because you're losing your estrogen, that's a natural thing to have happen. So the better off that you can go into that, and taking care of your metabolic health is just so critical for you to feel the way you want to feel in the later decades of life. Okay. Because what we are seeing as aging is really not, Mark Hyman calls it inflammaging, because we're actually, like, the diseases that we are getting and how we are feeling in our bodies, it just really doesn't have to be that way. But when we're waiting, you know, if you're in your like you're pre-diabetic, and we're just kind of not going to do anything and sit around until you creep up into that range where we can medicate, we've lost, like, it's just, there's so much could have been done, you know, earlier. And there's a lot that we can do if you are there. There's a lot that we can do to reverse that. But it's just, this is just how critical it is to find somebody to run these labs for you, because we're not getting the whole picture with Western medicine. And there's so much that we can do, and it makes you feel better. Yes. And then just kind of, you know, again, just, I cannot harp enough about how much stress management plays a huge role in hormonal health, but literally health in general. And, you know, I would say stress management techniques. So whether that is meditation, whether that is finding a therapist, whether that is joining a gym, whether that is doing yoga, going for walks, deep breathing is the number one thing, I think, probably, and it's free and you can do it anywhere, is stress management in your teens, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, and every decade that you are alive is the number one thing that you can do for your health, but also the number one thing that you can do for your hormonal health. Again, because you're now going to be relying on those adrenal glands who have been chugging along and doing the heavy lifting for a lot of years. And now you're going to ask them to do some really important things, like keep you well, you know, keep your heart healthy, keep your bones healthy, keep your brain healthy, keep your skin healthy. And you know, whether you are kind of in the perimenopause phase, whether you're in the menopause phase, or whether you're, you know, in your teenage years, or you have a daughter who's in your teenage years, or a niece, like, we can be doing so much to support our hormonal health through the decades, so that when we get to this transition, it can be less intimidating, less challenging for people. And it just kind of sets you up to win again into longevity, right? It's like, yes, we want to look good. We want to, whatever, feel good in our bodies, but like it's so much deeper than that. We're really taking care of our health.
The number one treatment for the adrenal glands, you ready for this? Routine. They love routine. Routine is free, just like sleep, just like breathing, just like walking. I mean, this is like, I get a little bit like, why did we even go to school? It's like what makes being a human a human? It's like we're designed to eat food, we're designed to move our body, we're designed to breathe, we're designed to eliminate. We should be pooping multiple times a day, at least once a day. We are designed to drink water, and we are designed to play, and all of it doesn't have to be that complicated, except our world is so complicated and so toxic that our poor little vessels are really, really stressed out. And a lot of the stressors, I was just talking to a patient earlier today about how a lot of these stressors are invisible. That the air you're breathing in your house is probably toxic and more toxic than the outside air, which is why you should open your windows for 1 hour a day. I don't care what is happening outside, whether it's 30 below or 89 degrees, open your windows for an hour a day. I want everyone to be doing this. Our air quality and our water quality are so bad we're, especially if you're living in a house that's more newer. That's not correct English. That's built in, the past few decades. Is we've built them to be really efficient, which is great. But then you have this toxic greenhouse called your house where everything's off gassing, like your paint and your furniture and your mattresses and your floors and your sealants and your cleaning products. So it like traps all of those toxins in the air in your house. So if you open your windows for an hour a day and just let that exchange happen, that would make me very happy. And it's free. Then then our water quality. Again, you open the tap on your water and you're like, I mean, it's fine. It's city water. They were just did a study, the Days of the World did a study in tested LA water in Los Angeles, and it was full of benzodiazepines. So everyone's drinking benzo. It's like, get a good water filter. I mean, that's all. If you're gonna pick one thing, pick water filter, please. And AquaTrue has a great one. Berkey is a good one. I do have a link that we'll share somehow. The internet worlds will share with you guys. And then glyphosate. Glyphosate is a huge stress on our body. It is 4 billion pounds or per gallons are sprayed a year on Mother Earth. It is an endocrine disruptor. It eats holes in our gut lining. I know I'm doomsaying right now, and I promise we will really give you more solutions. But I just like the reality is we are really drinking a toxic soup and breathing a toxic soup and then expecting our bodies to like thrive in menopause. And it's like the adrenal glands alone are just like, I'm so sorry, I just can't do it. So these are kind of a cool case study. Do you mind moving so I can?
Oh yeah, sorry.
So these are one of the tests that we do. Many of you have done this. These are testing saliva cortisol. So a lot of people will come to us and say, "Oh, I know my cortisol is fine. I had it tested." And I'm like, "Well, was it serum?" They're like, oh, "I'm sorry, what?" And I was like, "Was it a blood test?" And they were like, "Yes." And I was like, "Well, was it just in the morning or whenever you had the test done? Was it just a one-time draw?" They were like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Yep, figured." And it was probably fine. And they're like, "Mm-hmm." And I was like, well, this is where, again, Western medicine views the body and the world very differently than we do, because cortisol is not just a one-time thing. As we just said in the beginning, it spikes in the morning and lowers during the day. So it matters, that whole pattern, what's happening. I want to know through saliva, which is from my perspective, the best way to test your cortisol throughout the day, your cortisol patterning. And so we have people, we ship them a kit, you spit in a tube for 4 times a day upon waking, around like, I don't know, noon, and then 4 o'clock, and then before you go to bed. Because I want to see that pattern. And these are 3 different people. Now, if you see the light green line in the middle of that graph, that's what normal is. Can you guys see that? That's what those black dots are, their samples. And a lot of times people will think, they're like, oh yeah, my adrenals are so jacked out. My cortisol is so high. And we see that during periods of like I want to say acute stress, but like years of really intense stress, we'll have a flat line at the top where the adrenals are pumping out cortisol to try and keep that person alive. Now, the person on the far left, this was a person after 2 years of chronic stress, then she found us. Okay, so her adrenals she's flatlined. Her body is barely pumping out cortisol. I picture it like a sputtering engine. It's like, pit, 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 pit. And this person on the left, it can barely get out of bed. Like, actually barely get out of bed. Like, she is so exhausted and exhausted throughout the entire day. Person in the middle, similar story. She just went through a major trauma about a year and a half ago and has been reeling, just started therapy, just started looking into her diet, just started recognizing her sleep dysregulation, just started recognizing all of this, and is exhausted. And she just did these labs with us, and she's flatlined. I told her, I was like, if you had done this a year and a half ago, we would have seen you flatlined at the top of the curve, not the bottom. Mm-hmm. And then the person on the far, I can't see, the person on the far right is, her job is very stressful. When do you start working? In the morning. Can you see her cortisol is above that curve? That means she wakes up in the morning, she's like, and her adrenals are like, what tiger are we running from again today? Now, she just started working with us again. We just ran these. And what will help her do is recognize that stress and then do things like ashwagandha, lavender, holy basil, melissa, these herbs that will help naturally lower cortisol. But it's not just about taking supplements. This is about recognizing that her job stresses her out. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do about that? Breath work, meditation, maybe quitting your job, right? Starting to create a different relationship with her life. And I'm not telling everybody that they need to go quit their job if they hate it, but understanding it has a physiological impact on you. So again, Katie, we can't stress this enough. Like, recognizing that stress isn't just coming from the inside of your head. It's coming from blood sugar dysregulation. That's a huge stress on the body. It's coming from sleep dysregulation. That is a huge stress on the body. It is coming from thoughts. It is coming from past trauma. And I guarantee every single one of you on this call knows exactly what I'm talking about in your life, because we're not immune to that. And a lot of us sweep it under the rug, but it still has an impact on your physiology. Yep. And then there's actually visualizing a tiger. So those are all the ways that the body perceives and deals with stress. So really owning that you drinking benzodiazepine because you live in LA is really stressful on your body. Get a water filter. So it's like, how can we start to lower the stress? Like really starting to, again, clean up your house. But the number one thing for the adrenals is they love routine and they love to be loved. Like, really loving on them. Like, I mean, Katie and I will ask each other, like, is this worth the cortisol? Like, if something stresses me out, she's like, is it worth the cortisol? And I'm like, you're right. It's not. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm just going to go for a walk barefoot in the grass for like 4 seconds, or do deep breathing, or just like bitch for 45 seconds and then let it go. Or is this worth the cortisol? The answer might be yes. So it's really understanding, like, is that light bulb in the bathroom that has been out for 6 months, and every time you walk by the bathroom, you get that twinge of like, gotta change the light bulb. That's stimulating cortisol. Change the light bulb or let it go. Right? I mean, I'm kind of picking on it, like simple things, but so when I say routine, I mean routine around sleep. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. It's free. Stop making excuses. And unless you're breastfeeding, like that, you guys get a pass. Then routine around food. Mm-hmm. The adrenals actually kind of love to know when you're eating and keeping your blood sugar balanced. And I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. Like, that's a whole other course. But eating, managing your blood sugar, I'll say that. Mm-hmm. Manage your blood sugar. The other is movement. The body loves moving. The adrenal glands love moving. Move. Walking is the number one movement associated with longevity. So that's what I mean when I mean routine. And food you have to buy, but sleep's free and walking is free.
Yeah, and the other thing is there's a bunch of stuff that we can do to also take care of our blood sugar. So last at the last class that we did last month, we sent out an ebook. So we'll send that out again just because I know we probably won't have enough time to go over some of those hacks. But I really want to just arm you. We've harped on insulin and blood sugar management enough to give you. I really want you guys to like leave feeling like you have actionable things that you can implement into your life. Just things like the order in which we eat our food, apple cider vinegar, water, like we have a really great guide for you just to start implementing that. So we'll send that out tomorrow alongside the recording. And then
Yeah, I mean, the thyroid plays a huge role. I know we're coming up on time, so I'm going to kind of fire hose this. So the thyroid is the analogy, and many of you have heard me use this, is that the thyroid is like the thyroid and the adrenals are like a cart and a horse, cart and two horses. So the thyroid is the cart and the horses are the adrenal glands. And like I said earlier, the thyroid can play a huge role in slowing you down because it is responsible for metabolism, heart rate, body temperature. And so if it senses, one, if it gets sense that you're not speaking your truth and you're not emotionally in alignment, or it's been exposed to heavy metals, or it's not getting in the right minerals, or it's been exposed to toxicity like glyphosate, it's like, I can't handle this. Plus, it's then feeling like the adrenals need to slow down because you are running at burning the candle at all ends. Meanwhile, the ovaries are like fiddly dee, fiddly da. Oh, Susie, do you feel like working today? And Marianne's like, no, silly. We should go get a glass of wine. And then they go off, and the thyroid's like, adrenals, I am so sorry. I'm trying to slow you down because I know I can see the ovaries are exiting stage left, and the two horses are like panting and dragging this cart. And so the thyroid's like, I'm going to slow this ship down. I'm going to put the brakes on. So the horses get a break so that when this woman goes through perimenopause and menopause and the ovaries leave, that the horses have enough energy. So that's when the woman gets her TSH checked, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. And that's when the pituitary tells the thyroid to release thyroid hormone. And when the thyroid starts to slow you down because it can sense that your horse's adrenals are struggling, then TSH, that messenger from the brain, starts to line up like they're knocking at the door of the thyroid, and the thyroid's like, I'm not opening my door because we need to slow the ship down. And so the brain's like, yeah, but thyroid, we need thyroid hormone. And the thyroid's like, sorry, I'm trying to slow this down. And the brain's like, I get that, but we still need thyroid hormone. And the thyroid's like, sorry, not going to slow down. I'm trying to slow the ship down. So then we draw your blood as a physician and we see high TSH. And then you're put on a thyroid med. And guess what? It wasn't actually a thyroid problem. It was a horse problem. It was not a cart problem. The cart was trying to take care of the horses. And then the woman's put on levothyroxine or Synthroid or nature's thyroid or whatever. And she's like, I've been on this for years and I don't feel better. And I'm like, well, it's probably because it's not an actual thyroid problem. The thyroid is trying to help. So again, with the lab work that we do, we look at, and again, it's like it's not just Katie and I, it's like what functional medicine does is looks at the bigger picture called, okay, look, we'll look at thyroid, TSH. We look at things like free T3 and free T4, which is what the thyroid's actually doing. I won't go through like the specifics, but we look to see, is this actually a thyroid problem? Because it could be. Or is this actually an adrenal problem? Which it could be. And so which came first, the cart or the horses, right? So that's again where functional medicine lab work is way more helpful when it comes to hypothyroidism, which I would say easily 90% of the patients that we see have some level of hypothyroidism or have been diagnosed and have been on meds and are not feeling better. Okay. So I know that's a lot. And the bottom line is there is something that we can do about it. And I know we've been talking about labs. And so what Katie and I can do is help you feel way better in your body. And I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions. We're going to open this up here in a minute. And what the comprehensive lab work that we offer is asking the questions more of why, not of what.
Mm-hmm.
Conventional medicine asks, what disease do you have? And please know that I am not knocking Western medicine. Like it has saved billions of lives. Like
Yeah.
if you get hit by a bus, do not come see me, but we are failing chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so the medicine of what disease do you have based on your routine labs? And then what medication can we give or what surgery do we do? What functional medicine does is looks at why. Why is your thyroid creeping up? Why are you gaining weight? Why do you have autoimmune disease? Why do you not have a solid bowel movement? Why are you not having bowel movements at all? Why do you have migraines? Why do you have breast cancer? Why? And so what our lab, the more comprehensive kit that we look at asks, that comes up from it asking those questions. I was just saying to a group that Katie and I are in yesterday that kind of sort of sadly dawned on me that the lab work that we're running from the conventional medical world is, it's a CBC, it's which you can diagnose, anemia, in some severe cases, cancer, but like, allergies. So say you get diagnosed with anemia, then you're put on a drug for the anemia. Then we look at a lipid panel and we see high LDL. And then we blame cholesterol, so we put you on a statin. There's a solution there.
Mm-hmm.
Then we run a complete metabolic and we see high glucose. And then we diagnose you with diabetes and we put you on a drug. And so there's solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So or we run a metabolic panel and we just run TSH and then we put you on a hypothyroid drug because
Mm-hmm.
there's an answer there.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a drug for adrenal crashing. There's no drug. There are supplements, there's routine, there's lifestyle shifts, there's stress management tools. And so it's not that this system over here it's broken. It's just that they're waiting for the disease. They're waiting for the numbers to match the drug so that they can quote unquote help you.
Yeah, to match the solution.
Right.
It's like, and if that was, and for good reason, right? It's like you want to be in a stage, like for you to be taking thyroid medication, you would want to make sure that you need thyroid medication, right? It's like you want to make sure that you're at the range where that intervention isn't too extreme for the state that you're in. But the question is, why are we waiting? Why aren't we doing anything sooner about this? Why are people, I mean, I had a patient this past week who told me that he has been pre-diabetic for 20 years. And because he's just been hanging out at pre-diabetic for 20 years, they didn't really do anything because there's nothing there's not really, like, what do you do? There's no drug for that. And so having a space, and whether it's through us, whether it's through someone else, like we just really want to arm you with the information that these are really the labs that you need to be getting done. And it is challenging to do. I mean, we have sent so many patients a wish list, right? They come into our office and they say, I just saw my PCP, I just had labs done. And I said, that's great. And you probably haven't had the labs that we would like to see that are actually going to tell us what's going on and to figure out why you don't feel well when everything says you are normal, right? And we've sent so many patients a wish list of, can you get this done, this done, this done, and this done, which is, kind of in excess of what most PCPs will run. And I would say 99% of the time they come back and say they won't run it or it won't be covered by insurance. And so ultimately, we wanted to create an opportunity for people to have access to get these labs done and to have an opportunity to meet with Tanda or with myself to go over these labs and give you a game plan. And if that is continuing to work with us, great. And if that is, another functional med doctor down the road, or if it's like, I've been really self-studying now that I kind of understand what's going on, I can implement a lot of these at home, or I can, hop on these master classes every month, or, ask Tanda questions on Instagram. Like there's so many levels of how we can help, but getting these labs done is just really, really critical in actually knowing what's going on in your body, actually feeling good, and actually preventing, right? It's like, again, we don't have to have that inflammation. That doesn't have to be your story.
Yeah. And so she was like, yeah, okay, great. So help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Katie and I have done is we put together a comprehensive lab kit panel that for a $750 investment to you guys, you would we would drop ship you the two kits. You would do the saliva kit, which is the 4-spot saliva that I talked about,
Yeah.
and that's self-collection. And then the other kit is a bunch of vials, and it comes from Rupa Health, and they in the little form that you get, they'll tell you which lab draw to go to near your house. And so you take your little kit to that lab draw, you get your blood drawn, and then you mail it to the lab. We get the results, and then we get to jam out and go over your labs and make a plan. And like Katie said, it's like whether it's through us or through another functional medicine doctor, or after you do it through us, you're like, no, I actually really want to go work with Susie Q down the road. Like, I just want you to get help. And again, Katie and I we've been humming and hawing about, how much do we actually do? Because we don't want to break the bank. I mean, I know $750 is definitely still an investment for a lot of you.
Absolutely.
And 100% worth it.
Mhm.
Because either way, whether you work with us or not long term, obviously I'm invested in that because I love you all. And it will give you so much information. And again, like the lab reviews that I've done this last week from the group that we did last month, it has been like boom, boom, boom. Like thank the Lord that they did this, and that we are looking and seeing these insulin levels. And yeah, so the $750 covers the labs and a consult with me or Katie.
Yeah, it's an hour long. We do a deep dive into your labs and we give you a plan. It's like, and we would say, in a perfect world, you'd work with us X amount of times a month, or, this is what we would do. And, or if, it's like, I really think I'm armed with enough information, I'm going to go try this on my own a little bit. Like there's lots of ways that we can help you. Another common question is, can you just run the labs that your PCP won't do? Yes, we could. That being said, you'll save maybe $20. So it's not necessarily
Yeah, because
kind of worth that as long as you're like getting your blood taken, because it's like the CBC, the CMP, and a lipid panel. That's just not the tests that are really going to break the bank. And so what I would say is depending on some of the recommendations that we might make as far as supplementation go, having a CBC done and a CMP done is, just kind of for us to do our due diligence. So from just like a liability perspective, it's probably not worth it.
no, it's just a lot of back and forth, but it's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
But yeah, so again, just to reiterate, the initial cost of the 750 will get you all of these labs, and we're running, like I said, cortisol, metabolic markers, cardiac markers, inflammatory markers, and then like the norms, like Katie said, the CBC, Met panel, and lipid panel. And then you would get with that included in that price, 1 hour to jam out about what happened in your labs and how you're feeling in your life. And then the plan after that, somebody asked that, then what it would look like to work with our team. We do anywhere between 3 and 6 month plans. We typically start people on a 3-month plan, just so that builds the foundation. And those plans range from $400 a month to about $1,000 a month. And it's customized treatment plans, which with supplements tailored to your labs and what you would need. Then it's whatever other referrals that you would need outside to build your team, whether you really need acupuncture, because we do telemedicine. So if you do need to build your team outside of that, but we also will build movement plans, nutrition plans, stress management plans. I have been known to, I'm going to say force people to get, animals in their life, to start drawing again, to go buy a soccer ball and play. Like we have gotten so divorced from what we actually love to do, and our little hearts get so sad. And then our adrenals have to take care of that too. So it becomes really fun. We get enmeshed into your life for 3 months. And then after that, we have more conversations. Do we keep going at the rate we're going? Do we pull back? Do we do a year-long plan? Do we refer you? I mean, it's after the 3 months, the 90 days. Again, we work with you in that. But again, either way, this is so important to Katie and I, that you start to learn what your body has actually been telling you, and you're not crazy. I mean, I did a post on Instagram the other day that was like, ladies, you're not crazy. Like it's not in your head. It's not because your mother had it. It's called epigenetics. It's not just diet and lifestyle. You don't need an antidepressant. Like you deserve to know what your little body has been saying for so many years. And you're like, gosh, I just feel off. but my labs are fine. How many times we have heard that? I could buy a lot of things. But really, it's like we just want you to feel good in your body and give you the opportunity to know why you're feeling the way you're feeling and then make a plan based on that. So,
And one of the questions that we're getting is this possible for Canada or if you're outside the States? What I would say is just please reach out to us directly. So tanda at drtandacook.com.
I'll put it in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, because there are ways to get creative around that for sure.
Yep. And then also Katie at drkatiecollier.com. And then we'll put the link, Karen, can you put the link in the chat now for people who may be interested or want to learn more? And then also this QR code will take you if you have your phone on you.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. And like I said, we're also doing these once a month. And again, they're free, they're fun. They're just an excuse to, jam out with you guys and talk about health. And then I know a lot of you said that you didn't get the handout from last month, so we'll make sure that that is happening on this. We just had some major tech issues happen last month.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. We'll send that out to
Yep.
last email group and this email group.
Yep.
And then oh, thank you. Yeah, Avshan. Yeah, insurance doesn't cover. Mercury was in retrograde, and I actually think it still is in retrograde, honestly, and that is a really good point. Awesome, loves. Well, I know we're at time, and thank you for hanging out. You guys are amazing. We love you. We'll see you next month. And shout if you have any questions. You have our email or contact me on Instagram.
Yes, thank you so much. So good to see all of you.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.